So thanks for having us here. ESG Times is the pioneer in the field of ESG news in India, and I'm very proud that I had the opportunity to, bring more seriousness about ESG in Indian media. Now we have Professor Phil here, who is an authority in energy transition and other things. So I think that without much pleasantries, we can directly get into the questions. Okay.
Hey, yeah, great. Thanks to me.
So, Professor Phil, we know that we need a massive scaling needed in the energy infrastructure in the transition of energy, including generation, grid modifications, and end-to-end electrification and everything. And there are a lot of private and public commitments already there. But my question is that is these commitments are enough to actually achieve the targets which we have for 2030 and 2050?
Okay, that's the $50,000 question, isn't it? The simple answer is what we're doing at the moment is absolutely not enough. Okay, there was a report came out from the International Energy Agency just last week, and if you look at what countries around the globe have committed to do, then we still see a rise in carbon emissions, especially related to energy, because energy makes up about 75% of all emissions. So we still see a rise in emissions going forward for the next decade or so. And if you look back at last year, we increased our emissions by it was very close to 700 million tons of CO2. Right? So if you project that forward, the line slows down in its rate of increase, but it doesn't reverse. Similarly, if you look at what people or what governments around the world have committed to try and do, so the first line was sort of what we're doing at the moment. The second line is if you take into account everything that everyone says they're going to do, we're still way off, right? The line starts to go down, so overall global emissions related to energy starts to reduce, which is good news, but it's nowhere near close enough to get us to 2050 net zero. So we're a very long way off from doing. Now we're doing good things. Okay, so renewables is coming on, I think probably quicker than anybody thought it was going to, but nowhere near fast enough. The phase out of fossils is non-existent. Right? So we're still increasing. We're on about 100 million barrels a day of oil, and we have been for a good while. The IEA's optimistic projections is if everything went well, that would maybe stick around that number or increase maybe 1 million barrels or two more. But if we stick with what we're doing, then all the signs are that that's going to increase even further, and we might even break through 110 million barrels. So we've got renewables going well on one side, fossils really not reducing at all on the other side, and then structural challenges around how much further can we go with renewables without spending a whole bunch of money on related technologies. So yeah, sorry, being a bit of a Debbie Downer, but it's not going well.
Okay, excellent, Dr. Phil. So my next question is that about the global grid. It was initially designed for the consistent energy, consistent energy sources, right? And now solar, wind, extra are inconsistent in nature. So how do we manage this gap? There is a lot of issues which is going to happen to the grid, and any kind of storage solution that can unlock the full regenerative power by 2040, anything of that sort?
Now it's probably the sort of the dirty secret of renewables, if you like. So renewables are inherently dependent on what Mother Nature flings at us. Mother Nature can decide that it's going to be cloudy for a week, or it's going to have no wind for a week, or whatever. So that variability is the thing that stops us like switching tomorrow across onto 100% renewables. So managing that is difficult. Right? If you were to look at the cost of, let's say you wanted to put a megawatt of power station in at the moment, it's very, very clear that renewables will be a cheaper option than an oil or a gas or a coal plant. Okay? And it's significantly less in the right place. Okay? But the challenge with that variability means that you also have to add a whole load of ancillary services on the edge. Okay? So we've got to install that power station, and then if nobody wants the power and we are producing, then we need to store that energy. Okay? And that costs money. And which technology we put in to store that energy depends on how long we want to store. Right? So if we're thinking, let's take a solar plant as an example, you're thinking, well, the sun goes down, so we're not producing overnight, but I still want energy out of it. Batteries are the obvious solution for that, because you can put in a reasonable sized battery at quite a reasonable cost that will store enough energy to see you through the night. The challenge comes when we start to talk about weeks worth of storage or months worth of storage or maybe interseasonal storage. And there we've got a few different options, which is good. So pumped hydro, where we take the excess energy and we use that to push water uphill, store it at the top, and then release that water through a turbine when we need it later. That's been around for many, many years. Right? So the challenge with that is, can we find the sites to do that? Because people start to get a little bit antsy when you start to flood the valleys and all that sort of stuff on it. So it's good for certain areas if we have the right geology and if we have the right sort of social circumstance that allows you to do that. Possibly a more interesting way would be to take excess electricity and convert it into chemicals. Right? So convert it into an artificial fuel. Right? And there you could think of a synthetic oil or a synthetic gas, or maybe hydrogen or something like that, store that away, and then when renewables are not doing their thing for you, you convert it back from chemistry back into electricity by burning it or whatever, and then pushing that through a turbine. So there are options, and they all exist. The challenge is who pays for them, right? Because when you're generating electricity, you've got a unit of electricity coming out that you can say, okay, that is 10 cents, please give me that if you want to use it. If you then take that kilowatt hour and you put it into a battery, sits there until you want it, and then you pull it out, well, who pays for that storage service? Right? And that's probably the biggest challenge to a full transition to renewables, is the generation is obvious, how it creates value. Storage, not obvious, or at least not obvious who is going to pay for it. Right? Alongside all of that, when we start to look at, well, let's look back in history. What you used to have is a very large gas plant over there, using gas, heating water, running it through a turbine, producing electricity, push it down a line, and somebody at the other end, they use it, and they pay for it. That's great. We're moving to a system now that is much more distributed. Yeah? So I can put solar on my roof, and I can generate energy for myself. And if I generate excess, then I want to push that back onto the grid, and I want you to pay me for that. Or sensibly, nowadays, I would put it into a battery in my house, but there you go. Right? So we move from a system that is big power producer, big lines going down to a single user over here, to a case where we potentially got millions of power stations, all pushing energy onto the grid outside of anybody else's control. This is just my control if I push it onto the grid or if I use it. Right? So you move from a system that is predictable, straightforward, easy to model, to a system that is chaotic, almost. Because you can't rely on me to produce electricity anymore, so you can't bank on my solar. Right? But then if I'm multiplied 1 million times, this system is now just chaos. So managing that is something that I'm not sure we've figured out how to do yet.
I think that the question is, so what is beyond batteries? For storage, for example, like wind or solar, there are seasons, which actually support them. And when we are actually moving to a completely renewable world, a world that is powered by renewable energy, we need to have that kind of storage which can support seasons. Yeah. So what are the innovations that is happening in that field?
When we start to talk about interseasonal storage, the amount of energy that you want to gather up and hold on to just becomes enormous, right? And your options there become quite limited. And we're really talking at that stage of converting energy or electrical energy into chemical energy, right? Hydrogen is the big one that's been talked about. But hydrogen has its challenges on storing hydrogen is really tricky. It's a little tiny molecule, and if it can escape from storage, it will. Right? So the techniques to store that hydrogen are expensive and difficult to manage. Right? Now, there's innovation going on in that space that should at least start to alleviate that problem. But hydrogen's very tricky. The easier one, if you like, is to convert it into a liquid fuel. Right? And there are techniques that are being innovated. Maybe they're certainly not commercial yet, but there's techniques of using carbon capture. Right? So we take CO2 out of the air, and then we do hydrogen production with excess renewable energy. Run that, or we run the excess electrical through an electrolyzer to produce hydrogen, and then we use a chemical process to join those two together. So we take CO2, which is a problem, we take excess power, which is a problem, convert that to hydrogen, join the two together, and you end up with a hydrocarbon. Right? And guess what? You're back to a synthetic diesel or a synthetic petrol or something like that. So there's technologies available for us down the line that will enable us to do that. Now, the way to challenge that answer would be, but if we're taking carbon from over here and we're taking energy from over here and we're putting them together, what we're actually doing is not reducing carbon. Right? All we're doing is we're taking carbon, which is a problem, converting it to something useful, then we'll burn it to make the same problem, and then we'll capture it again. So we're just going round in a big old circle. So what it doesn't do is reduce carbon, but what it does do by sort of some strange means is it stops us burning the fossil fuel that we would have had to have burnt. Right? So you could argue that it reduces, but in real terms it doesn't inherently. It just does sort of as an aside, if you like.
Thank you. Interesting. So, Professor Phil, my another question is that, now many countries are betting heavily on hydrogen. Some are geothermal and some are betting on advanced solar. So basically, our demand is so high, right? I mean, future demand is so high. So, which of this technology will be, technologically and economically viable at scale to cater the needs in future?
Okay. Let's pick them off one at a time. So let's start with solar. Solar is going to dominate. There's no doubt at all that solar will be the predominant technology for producing electricity in now and into the future. It's cheap. It's got no moving parts. It's crazy reliable. You put it in the field and it lasts 25 years. The cost curves on it. I mean, solar's reduced by the cost of a solar panel is reduced by 90% in the last 10 years. And there's technological room to carry that curve on for a little bit longer by introducing new types of solar and stuff like that. So if you wanted to bet some money on where it's going, you would go solar 100% of the time, no matter what. Onshore wind is, again, cheaper than fossils. So I think onshore wind has a large part to play, especially in geographic regions that are not blessed, like we are here, with amazing solar resource. So the higher latitudes, sort of northern Europes and stuff like that, America, should they should be big into wind. The challenge with wind is land area, but the option for that is you put it out offshore. Right? And offshore is very close to parity now with fossil fuel costs. Right? And it has other advantages in that because it's not disturbed, the wind isn't disturbed by blowing through buildings and all of that sort of stuff. The quality of the wind hitting the turbine offshore is better. Right? It's more consistent, it's more reliable. So offshore wind is a good option. It needs to reduce its cost a little bit more, but that will play a big part. Hydrogen's really tricky. It is the perfect fuel, right? Because if you burn it, it combines with oxygen and you get water out of whatever it was that you burnt it in. So in a very real way, it's the perfect fuel. The challenges with it is it's a whole new, complete industry and supply chain that you've got to put together. And it's really made of three pillars, right? You've got a group that's going to have to produce hydrogen. You've got a group that's going to have to store it and distribute it. And then you've got a group who are going to use it, be that through fuel cells or whatever, right? The challenge is who builds what first, right? So if I'm a producer and I can't see a way to store it and then distribute it, and I haven't got anyone who's going to use it, well, I'm not going to produce it. And similarly, if I'm a user and I can't get hold of my hydrogen cheaply enough, well, I'm not going to build my fuel cell electric vehicle. So that whole hydrogen supply chain or production chain or whatever is the reason that we don't drive hydrogen vehicles now. Right? It makes perfect sense. Because if you've got a hydrogen vehicle, you could refuel it in minutes, exactly the same as we do with a petrol or diesel car. You can drive for a gazillion kilometers. You can pull into a garage, recharge it, 5 minutes later you're driving out. So it hits all the convenience and all of that sort of stuff. But establishing that supply chain is expensive and time consuming, and it's not at all certain that that all three of those pillars will develop in step enough to make it an economic, viable venture. So, yeah. Now, storage might be the answer, right? Because if you have to store excess renewable energy in hydrogen, maybe that builds the hydrogen infrastructure that says, okay, the production side of it is done, and then distribution and use will sort of follow on. So maybe it'll go that way. I don't know. We'll see.
Actually, I don't know whether the audience can ask questions in this thing. No. Okay, so if there is no questions, okay. Okay, by the time I want to ask one more thing to you,
Okay.
that, the transition cost is too high and somebody has to bear the burden, right? So how the low-income group of people, how do they afford this?
That's very tricky. And again, it depends on geography. Okay, so if you have an established economy with an established energy ecosystem, what you're talking about is transitioning across. In that circumstance, then realistically, governments are going to have to step in and support the lower earners to convert all of things like their appliances and whatever to low energy appliances. Otherwise, if you try and apply the costs of that transition sort of equally to everybody, you're going to exclude some people from energy because the energy costs will go up as a result of it.
Hello, Professor.
Hey.
So I'm asking, with AI into the picture, the energy demand is growing at a different level, right? So as per you, is it affecting the net zero target, first of all? And if we want to replace with some sort of renewable, which will be the most effective source of energy to fulfill the AI demand of energy?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part.
AI demand is affecting our net zero target?
Okay, so AI is a really interesting one. There's some reasonable, very grounded analysis out there that says that AI currently uses about 1% of global power. If we don't do it in the right way, that could increase to 7 or 8 or 9% of global power, right? Which would obviously be really tricky. Majority of that concentrated in data centers, and the majority of data centers concentrated or clustered together. So AI has the opportunity to give us real challenges. On the counter to that, if we employ AI to manage our energy system, there's an opportunity for real-time control of both the generation and the distribution systems and the users at the end through demand-side management for AI to make incredible gains on the efficiency of the energy system in general. Right? So you got, like, on the one side, really bad things, on the other side, really good things. On the really bad side as well, there's if you look at the curve of how much processing power in terms of electrical energy to run that processing power, how is that developing? Well, the energy consumption of the core chips that are running AI is coming down incredibly quickly. Right? So if you're an optimist, there's a real opportunity for the cost of an AI inference to come down quite a lot. But again, the challenge with that is the more AI does for us, and the more we all sort of buy into using AI all the time in everything we do, then the more inferences we will use, the more questions we will ask of AI, which will demand more power, but it's lower power, and we go round and round in that loop. Nobody is really sure which side of that argument is going to win. I suspect it will take us longer to incorporate AI into managing our electrical systems than it will for AI to gobble up a lot more energy. So I think we'll see a spike, and then maybe we'll start to smooth it out. But it's a great question.
Do we have time for one more question?
All done.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Yeah, thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.